A lot of people have been moving out into the country lately and buying homes further out of the city, which we absolutely love. We think that's a great thing, but there's some really specific differences when you live out away from resources that you need to be aware of when you move out to the country. And one of those is how long it might take for medical help to get to you in a medical emergency. Here we're at least 30 minutes from our local help, and if we call them, we can expect to have them here maybe 35 to 40 minutes before they're gonna get here. Sometimes an emergency happens and you need to stop the damage, do some triage before medical personnel can get to you. And so that's what we're talking about today. Today we're gonna be talking about the top 3 herbs that you should have on hand to tide over a situation until medical help can get to you. I thought the perfect person to help us with this topic would be Dr. Patrick Jones. So I have him here today. If you guys haven't met him, he's known as the Homegrown Herbalist. So check out his channel on YouTube. And how do you find you .com? You have a
homegrownherbalist.net.
.net. There we go. So go check that out because he has a ton of different information. But something that I really appreciate about Doc Jones as an herbalist is that most herbalists, if somebody comes to you with a gunshot wound and they're bleeding profusely, you can't touch them, right? You got to turn them, you got to say, let's call 911 and get some medical help. But Dr. Jones is also a veterinarian. So he's had the ability to put herbs into practice in a lot of emergency situations and see them work.
Yep.
So I think this is just amazing that we've got this experience of actually using the herbs in emergency situations over and over and over again and seeing them work reliably. So I'm really excited for Dr. Jones to tell us about the top 3 herbs we should have on hand and how to be ready to use them until medical help gets to us.
Yeah, it's really true that the veterinary practice was an amazing opportunity as an herbalist.
Yeah.
And I mean, for 30 years, I've been the emergency room.
Yeah.
And so we treat rattlesnake bites and gunshot wounds and shock and, you know, things that get hit by cars and everything.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, more often than not, well, without exception, my first grab for those cases is usually an herb, almost always. And I've got all the, you know, I've got drugs and scalpels and x-ray machines and all that other stuff. But the herbs can do things that some of the medicines can't. And so having some of those things handy in a situation like you find yourself in, as we were driving up this morning, Evan and I both said, what do they do in the winter? You know, because this isn't a 30-minute trip in the winter.
No,
you know?
it's not. No, sometimes it's a just stay home and call it good.
So it'd be really good to have some things on hand.
Yeah. Can I just go back to something you just said though?
Yes.
You know, a lot of people really think of herbs as being, you know, a good second option, right? But you're saying when you have the full pharmaceutical, you know, product line available to you, you usually grab herbs for an emergency situation like this.
Yeah, for a lot of the emergency needs, I'm grabbing herbs.
That is
and
amazing.
for a lot of the treatment needs, I'm grabbing herbs.
Yeah.
You know, in my vet clinic, I have a couple of cupboards about that big with meds in them. And I have a surgery suite and all the other stuff. But I had a whole room full of herbs.
Wow.
You know, and the reason is that there's a lot of things that plants can do that pharmaceuticals can't do. There's a lot of things pharmaceuticals can do better than plants too.
Yeah.
And there's some really great things surgery can do that neither of those can do, you know. But, you know, it's sort of silly that we have this turf war, you know, between the natural healing and modern medicine, but they're just different arrows in the quiver. But I did find that I was shooting a lot of green arrows in my practice. So I would say, you know, if I could only have one herb, one plant in my veterinary practice, it would be Cayenne. Because I've saved more patients more dramatically with that plant than all the other plants combined, really.
Oh, wow.
When the rubber meets the road and you got a real problem and you're gonna die from it, Cayenne's often the guy to grab. Cayenne is, I don't know if you've ever had it in your mouth, but it's pretty stimulating.
It's definitely stimulating.
But it's not just, you know, hot. I mean, it's really an extraordinarily stimulating hyper tonic for the whole body. You know, John Christopher, who was a great herbalist down in Utah, sort of really the guy that was the father of Western herbalism in this country. I mean, he really was a huge influence. He used to give it to people with heart attack, you know?
Yeah.
And well, why? What is it doing? Well, one of the things that Cayenne does is it markedly and immediately improves circulation.
Okay.
You know, dramatically improves circulation. It also clears the airways dramatically. You know, it's phenomenal for a sinus infection.
Yeah.
You know, squirt a little Cayenne in your mouth and that'll clear you right out. But the thing that I've used it for in emergency situations is for shock.
Okay.
You know, because that's something that if you don't deal with it before they get here, you're done. And there's things you can do for shock. You know, the old Boy Scout manuals, you know, you elevate the legs, or unless it's a head wound, and then you elevate the head, you know, but to get circulation into the core. Because what happens with shock is the vessels all dilate and relax, and your circulation drops.
Yeah.
Your blood pressure drops. And now your brain and your vital organs aren't getting what they need.
Right.
And that's bad. Cayenne for shock. I've had, you know, dogs that are hit by a car and they come in and their gums are white and their eyes are rolled back and they're hardly responsive and they're talking to the big white dog at the end of the tunnel about their life, you know. And you squirt a little Cayenne in them, and I mean, the gums are pink, the eyes are bright, and they're like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, right.
You know, something big happened to me. So I've used it on anesthesia reactions, you know, dogs that won't come out of anesthesia, squirt a little Cayenne in them. You know, I even give it to little C-section puppies.
Oh, yeah.
Because their mom's under anesthesia.
Yeah.
You know, and and they're under anesthesia.
Yeah.
And you pull them out, and you know they're not intubated and getting oxygen, and they're not breathing because they're asleep. Poke a little drop of Cayenne in their mouth and say, "Welcome to Idaho," and they scream and say, "I don't like Idaho," you know. But they wake up, you know. So it's really, really the premier crisis herb for shock. It's also really good for bleeding.
Yeah.
Topically or internally.
Okay.
Those are probably the two biggest things that kill people in a crisis, or blood loss and shock, you know.
So what form would you keep them on hand for, you know, for those emergency situations, for like a quick grab and go? What would you do?
So there's all kinds of different herb forms. And I always say it doesn't matter very much how we get herbs into our body. You know, it just doesn't matter very much how I got here today.
Right.
I could have come in my car, I could have ridden a mule, could have come in a helicopter. Once I get here, I do my thing,
Right.
you know. And the same thing with herbs if you get them in. But for a crisis herb, you want it right this minute.
Yeah.
If somebody's in shock, you're not going to make a tea. If somebody's having an asthma attack, you're not going to make a tea. You want it on hand, and you want to know that it's good. The delivery system that checks all those boxes is a tincture.
Okay.
Because it has a shelf life of forever.
Yeah.
You know, and it's got the other advantage of a tincture is it's very portable, takes a very small dose, and the alcohol in the tincture makes it absorb way more quickly.
Okay.
You know, you'll never swallow a dose of tincture. It'll all be absorbed before it ever gets to your stomach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the mucous membranes are real permeable to that kind of stuff. That's the only time I get snooty about what herb form I want, because a tincture is going to be faster.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, use powdered Cayenne, and that'll work really great. I don't use a tincture for bleeding topically, because that's pretty zingy.
Yeah, that
You know,
might
the powder's better
add a little
for that.
pain.
But for shock, I'd use a tincture.
So if you have Cayenne tincture and Cayenne powder on hand,
That'd be great.
that should give you a hand.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So the next thing's bleeding. And Cayenne also has, like I said, it's pretty good for bleeding. The one I really like for bleeding, there's two that I use together, but the one I use mostly is Yarrow.
Yeah.
Flower and leaf. You harvest Yarrow when it flowers. Take the top quarter or so of the plant, and the leaf and the flower are both good. That's really amazing for bleeding. I've had a lot of cases where, you know, a dog gets hit by a car or something, and they can be gushing blood from their mouth and nose from internal bleeding. And you squirt Yarrow in there, and it's like flipping a switch. I mean, it's
Wow.
astounding.
So
And
even internal bleeding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, internal bleeding.
Okay.
And you can use it topically, too, for bleeding. And I'm going to use the tincture internally, because I want it right now.
Right.
Topically, I'm always going to use the powder.
Okay.
You know, because that's just great. Sometimes I mix it with shepherd's purse, which is also good for bleeding.
Yeah.
And those two together have different functions. Yarrow is a vasoconstrictor, so it tells the cut end of that blood vessel to close up. Shepherd's purse improves clotting function.
Oh, okay.
So you get kind of approaching from both angles.
So a combination of the two.
But a tincture of both of those, and a powder of both of those would be great. But if you just had the Yarrow, that's 90% of it anyway. That'll work.
Yeah.
That's another one I'd have on a must-have of 3. And then the last thing that'll kill you is if you're not breathing.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That's quite bad for you, to not breathe. And
and that's definitely not something you want to wait for the emergency crew if they're 30 minutes away.
Exactly.
That's not going to work out.
If we can manage the shock and manage the bleeding, and if somebody has, for example, if someone has asthma, that's a time-sensitive, life-threatening emergency.
Right.
And so I would have something to open up the airways. There's several that can do that. Lobelia is fantastic for that.
Okay.
Cramp bark is fantastic. I saw you had a little cramp bark somewhere here.
I do, yeah.
Cute little rascals.
Yeah, brand new little guy.
Or gumweed. Do you have gumweed up here?
We don't have gumweed up here.
Yeah.
I've been trying to find it.
I'll send you some. Yeah, I mean, if you had a little lobelia tincture, again, that's a tincture, or cramp bark. What those do is they're muscle relaxants. That's basically what an asthma attack is. It's violent contracture of the bronchial muscles. If you can relax that muscles contraction, now you got open airways and you're okay.
Yeah.
So I would have that. I have a lot of clients, human and animal. I get a lot of, dogs don't get asthma hardly, but cats do, and people do. And I have a lot of human clients. I'm a naturopath too. I went to naturopath school.
Okay.
And so I had the vet practice and the naturopath practice at the same time. And I had a lot of people and a lot of cats that all they were doing for asthma was lobelia. They just quit taking the inhalers and stuff. They didn't need them anymore.
And that was
And they were just using a little lobelia when they needed it, and it straightened them out.
Oh.
Sometimes they were doing it twice a day as a preventative, and it worked.
Oh.
It's a good one to have on hand.
Yeah.
Because again, that's a thing that if you don't fix it in 5 minutes, you're dead.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So now, obviously, that's going to work in a breathing situation if it's asthma and your lungs have closed up for some reason, or maybe what about an allergic reaction? Will that help?
Yeah, it'll still open them up.
It'll open them up. Yeah.
For an allergic thing, it would be really great to add some brigham tea to that.
Okay.
To knock the antihistamine as an antihistamine.
Okay.
And that's also good for asthma. That combination, I have a formula that has both of those in it.
Oh, okay.
That combination of decreasing inflammation from allergic histamine stuff and relaxing muscles, and if you put a little expectorant in there too, then you win. That fixes everything with asthma. Lobelia has a little bit of expectorant property of it also by itself, so that's good too. But those are the 3 I'd have.
Those are the 3, okay.
Yeah.
Those are great. Those are good to have on hand. Luckily, I think I have every single one of those except for brigham tea.
Yeah.
So I'm good to go. The other thing to remember is that when you live out in the country and you're thinking about using herbs for medicine, you have to make sure that you actually have them on hand ready to use. You can't just say, hey, they're out in the garden, you know. The amount of times that I've sent kids out into the garden to go hunt for something in a non-emergency situation, but time sensitive, quick, go find this thing. That's not going to work if you're in an emergency situation. So make sure that you have the herbs, have them on your shelf, have them in a usable form, ready to go, and know how to use them. Write a little index card. What do I do? What do I, because in an emergency situation, you're going to get flustered. You're going to not quite know. But we'll definitely put the link to all the products that Doc Jones just mentioned down in the description of the video, so you can go check that out if you just want to purchase herbs. Doc Jones has a wonderful line of herbs and different herbal products. So check that out and make sure you guys get your kit ready so that you're ready to take care of yourself in a medical emergency while you're waiting for medical personnel.